I found my voice at a certain stage when I had rejected all music. I was really upset about it. I just thought I don't relate to anything. I couldn't relate to the Western tradition anymore. It was a time of high modernism, and I found that pretty depressing, I have to say. So I was almost on the verge of stopping, but I was living overseas at the time, but I came back to Australia, and walking in the bush was the thing that saved me, really. I started actually listening to the environment, and I came to realize or to assume that this is where music came from in the first place. So having wiped the slate clean, I then started to build on that very, very gradually. So I would walk in the morning when I wasn't teaching, and then I'd come back and confront a bit of blank paper or music paper to see what would happen. I didn't record anything. It was an experiment in a way, because I wasn't in those days depending on it for a living. That came later, and then of course you just have to keep going. But then for a small piece, I would have a great wad of papers at the end that I've been trying and trying to get it right. Because I was working with something new, a new language for me. It was slowly developing. Eventually I got some very slim pieces, some piano pieces, and others which were very spare. They didn't have a great deal of content at all. And I was working with something I felt was me at the time. And it was based on my, not so much reminiscence of or recording. I certainly never wrote down things like bird song or insect patterns. But these are the things and their intersection that, that inspired me to write certain kinds of music, which I gradually built on. That's another story. At this stage, it was very spare. I could mention pieces like Kumari for solo piano and the Tower of Remoteness for clarinet and piano. And I think the songs that you've sung, the Michael Dransfield songs, it was just starting to change at that point. But before that, it was very austere. I've retained the influence of the environment. It's always there in the background. But I've added to it increasingly, and often quite eccentrically, all sorts of things which are coming from diverse cultures, or my perception of what they are and their function. And I've sort of fleshed out the scaffolding that I'd established. The music, the surface of the music has changed dramatically. I was just listening to a piece of mine which has been edited for a double concerto for alto saxophone and percussion and orchestra, a big piece. And I thought, God, what have I done? It's incredibly eccentric and very dense and covering all sorts of things. I mean, gods and goddesses pop up and shamans sort of cross the concert platform and do things. It's in costume. So, I mean, but behind that, there's the scaffolding, the austere framework that I'd established before. But it's now very different for the listener. When I'm writing a piece, of course, I'm right inside it. And talking about vocal music, I remember just walking up and down a long beach, just with the Dransfield piece evolving in my head, and then I'd go back and play it on the piano and so on. But it does take a while to get right inside what I'm doing and feeling sort of confident about it. Not too confident, of course, because I can't do that because of the way I write by a sort of accretive process. It just adds on and on and on, and okay, that's fine. I've actually, in the score, here I've got a little tick after some of the bars. But okay, sometimes I come back to the pieces. I get sort of fairly discouraged sometimes, and then I have to have a little break, not too long a break. But my whole working process is focusing very intently and getting inside the thing, sort of suddenly coming out and realizing I'm hungry or I'm whatever. But I have to have a bit of a break, and this goes right back to my student days. I have to be reading a book that will switch me off for a while. These days, I'm usually, when I finish a piece, I find that if it works, and I'm happy to leave it. Except, of course, we go through it. And the rehearsal process is very important to me, too. And I depend on my colleagues to sort of point things out. And that's, and if they don't, I encourage it, of course. Now, this is a bit high. Well, you know, a bit high for me, a bit sort of, you know, this would work better if, because they know better about the voices, the instruments. I'm just a, well, I can't do it. I'm just someone who imagines I can. I'm obsessed with every little detail and making sure that what I think will work works. And increasingly it does. Well, it should by my age, shouldn't it?